YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here, and I want to get into a little bit with Bretonnia on what are their units good for? What should you use each unit for? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? There's a lot of units. I don't know if this will all be done in one video, but let's consider it part of a general testing. And I want to start off with their cavalry because I think their cavalry is really fun. And there's some of these that I don't think need a lot of testing. So I'm going to just cover it real quick right here. Mostly just the mounted yeomen. These guys, they're just really best in campaign for having some mobility early on. Not going to serve a lot of purpose in multiplayer except for having a cheap vanguard deploy unit that you could hide on certain maps to try and get to enemy skirmishers. But know that these guys are still going to get a pretty good beating from enemy skirmishers and would probably still lose to skirmishers like rangers with great weapons or like a regular quarreler unit or thunderer unit would be a tough fight for these mounted yeomen. So these guys would be more for very squishy units like artillery and like very cheap, unarmored, very non-defensive bow units. Knights Errant, let's start with these guys. So what do you get for 700 gold in a shock cavalry? It has the lance formation, decent armor. Again, here's the weapon strength, nothing to write home about. Decent charge bonus. Pretty decent leadership value, not a lot of melee attack and defense. So what do you get for 700? What is it good for? Let's go run a few tests. So we're going to watch the Knights Errant, and I'm going to use kind of, they say they're anti-infantry, so I'm testing against infantry, and we're going to test against an Empire Swordsman just for the sake of benchmarking. Here comes the charge of the Knights Errant. Swordsmen start at 5220. They were trying to brace for said charge. I'll leave these guys in for approximately 10 seconds. I don't have a timer going, so it won't be perfect. It's close enough, and we'll go ahead and cycle because it's shock cavalry. That's the purpose. And you can see that we took these guys from 5220 down to about 3356, so almost 2,000 damage on a charge with 20 kills. Not a very heavily armored unit, and they don't have a charge defense against large, so no big surprise. And that was in a 3 ranks deep charging formation. And this is also not using the lance formation, so we're going to test not using the lance formation. So are Knights Errant good at clearing, I mean they're a cheap cavalry unit, can they be good at clearing cheap infantry or delivering, they can probably deliver decent rear charges against more expensive infantry, but doing headlong charges for the purpose of destroying infantry, I don't think that these guys are going to want to stack up against the beefier stuff because they themselves have limited armor and melee defense. So, are they good at killing infantry? Sure. I would say anything in like the low tier quality for infantry, Knights Errant are going to massacre them. Let's look at another test. The next thing I want to look at with the Knights Errant is, does the lance formation help them? So what specifically does the lance formation boost? Well, it sends their acceleration up. It also increases their deceleration. It increases their charge speed and charge bonus. So basically these guys are going to deal more damage on the charge. You can see their charge bonus up to 61. But it does take away some of their speed. It really did focus their charge into the unit quite well. We're going to wait about 10 seconds. Maybe not quite 10 seconds, but I'll do it roughly the same amount of time that we did last time. I'll take them out of lance formation and retreat. It did slightly more damage on that charge, like maybe 100 hit points more damage. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that was like a real decisive improvement over the last one. Yeah, it was only slightly more damage than the previous time when we charged them. I'm not even sure if it was 100 hit points different. Both charges seemed roughly the same to me, and it's probably because the speed gets slowed down even though you're picking up the charge bonus. Speed definitely has a lot to do with the charge. So yeah, I'm going to reform, or are they just going to stand there? Look at them. They're just like, what's going on? Let's lead in another charge with the lance formation. See, the lance formation tightens up your front line, and I'm not sure, like, it didn't really decrease the amount of damage these guys did on the charge. It kind of did in previous Total War games. Sometimes it felt like it decreased their charge damage. It didn't really seem to decrease their charge damage here, and it seemed to give them a very good penetrating hit, whereas the first time my cavalry didn't seem to really penetrate the swordsman very well. but it looks like they kill them just as easy in the lance formation, so I don't know, you make up your own mind. I'm not going to take the time to test these Knights Errant against a bunch of large units because they're not going to do great versus other large units, so consider like an Empire Knight. Empire Knight has more armor, it's going to win that fight every time. A Knights of the Realm is a better unit, and it has a bonus versus large. Demigryph Knights are going to slaughter these guys. You know, I guess one thing may be interesting that we could try and find out is, well, yeah, there probably is one more test. Let's take a look at it. Alright, so I was curious. 2 Knights Errant cost actually a little less than a Demigryph Knight with Halberd. Can 2 Knights Errant have any prayer of being cost-effective against a Demigryph Knights with Halberd? Just an interesting question I wanted to ask, just because it's in the right price range. And as expected, the answer is looking like a solid no, as the Demigryph Knights chewed through the first unit before I was even able to rear charge, which would be a best case scenario rather than just plowing 2 Knights Errant headlong into the Demigryph Knight. And it looks like that the Demigryph Knights are going to have no problem absolutely mopping the floor with the Knights Errant. So yeah, I would just say the general rule of thumb, stay away from large units with the Knights Errant. Let them focus on infantry, and bear in mind that their relatively shaky stats in terms of low attack and all that other stuff are going to not do well versus higher tier infantry. So yeah, Knights Errant, what are they good for? Killing lower tier infantry. What are they not good for? Going after anti-large units or large units in general. They don't appear to serve a large purpose to that. Alright, the next unit I want to take a look at is Knights of the Realm. Now these guys received some changes in the last patch. I think their stats were slightly nerfed on some accounts, but they received a bonus versus large, and they also have the lance formation. So Knights of the Realm became an anti-large unit rather than a more anti-infantry type unit that they would have been before. Now they still have a hefty charge bonus at 68. Decent armor at 80. For heavy cavalry, it's a little bit on the low side because I believe both Empire Knights and like Reichsguard and others are going to have more, but of course those are more anti-infantry units. So for an anti-large unit, I guess that it's not that bad, but I mean, think about like a Demigryph Knights with Halberds, and I want to say they run 100 plus armor, just to give you an idea. Now, cost of 1,000 seems like a fairly reasonable price. I want to test these guys against a Boar Biggin, to see can they perform cost effectively at their price against a unit from another faction that has the same intended purpose. Boar Biggins are coming with less charge bonus, but they also have armor piercing, which is pretty big deal. So they've got armor piercing and anti-large, so you can see there's both. So it's quite possible that these Boar Biggins will hit above their weight class in terms of price up against a unit like this that is just anti-large. And you can see that anti-large bonus is just 10, but they don't, you know, the Knights of the Realm don't need as much armor piercing either, because a unit like this would be lower armor, and I think that's part of the reason why they gave Boar Biggins the armor piercing, is so that their low armor doesn't let them get killed by basically every other similar cavalry unit. Let's go run the test. Alright, first test against the Boar Biggins is just going to be no lance formation charge, and hopefully the Boar Biggins are going to countercharge me here. Come on, AI. There's only one unit on the battlefield. I think the AI will get their countercharge there. So let's see how it goes. Assuming that the AI actually got their countercharge, I think they did. It could have been better. But let's just see how this fight pans out. It looks like the Knights of the Realm are doing quite good, and they're going to win decisively. So if the AI actually did get their countercharge bonus there, then the Knights of the Realm performed extremely well in that fight. Let's try one with the lance formation on. Alright, here goes the lance formation. AI actually did charge me that time. So see what it's like with the lance formation versus... Now see, I think they must not have gotten their charge right last time, because this time the fight's a lot closer. But it looks like the Knights Errant are still going to perform pretty well, or sorry, the Knights of the Realm still going to perform pretty well. They're going to defeat the Boar Biggins. You know, when you consider the cost only being 100 difference, that's a pretty significant victory for the Knights of the Realm. So I'm thinking the first time that it was a little more decisive than it should have been. I don't think the Boar Biggins got their proper charge. So there you go. Knights of the Realm perform well versus Boar Biggins. How do they stack up against a few other units? And then can they do decent versus monsters? Good question. Let's go find out. Alright, unless you're a vampire player, you hate Crypt Horrors. Sorry, had to have a little fun there. How do Crypt Horrors stack up against Knights of the Realm? Knights of the Realm cost 200 more. They are an anti-large unit. Crypt Horrors are poisoning, anti-armor, but they don't have much armor themselves. Look at that, a Crypt Horror died right off the charge. Or no, it just got knocked over, my bad. But look at the damage done to the Crypt Horrors there. So I would say anti-large is definitely an appropriate tag for these guys. Now granted, there's no support here from Necromancer or Lord or healing or anything else, but a massive, decisive victory for the Knights of the Realm over a unit like Crypt Horrors. So can they be an anti-monster unit? I would say absolutely. Remember that they are not armor piercing, but against low armor monsters, they appear to be pretty effective. I have one more curiosity about monsters. Let's take a look. Alright, Knights of the Realm, Minotaurs with great weapons. I know this is a bit of a stretch because the Minotaurs cost a lot more, they have anti-armor, but since they were so effective versus Crypt Horrors, can they stand up to a unit that has even more value? Look at this, folks. Can the Minotaurs turn it around? They got wrecked on the charge. But now the Minotaur's causing a lot of damage. And some people ask why I say Minotaur versus Minotaur, because I know a lot of Americans say Minotaur. I'm just saying it because I think they're based off, like, wasn't it like King Minos and his labyrinth and all that stuff, so that's why I've been saying Minotaur. This is an impressive feat by the Knights of the Realm. I don't know how often they're going to come up against Minotaurs with great weapons, but I'm just saying, what it shows here is that even, you know, like any fairly low armor monstrous unit is going to suffer greatly at the hands of the Knights of the Realm. And this was a fight that both the AI before the battle said that the Minotaurs were going to win huge. And it was extremely close. The Minotaurs almost lost that, and they might have on any other day. So what that shows you there is that Knights of the Realm are going to punch extremely well on any large unit that is fairly low on armor. Well, what happens when a unit has a lot of armor? How does it impact the performance of the Knights of the Realm? Well, let's take a look. Alright, what about Reiksguard? Reiksguard has a ton of armor. It's not an anti-large unit, but it has a lot of armor. And it has a pretty solid charge bonus. The idiots, I'm not sure if they countercharge me because the AI is absolutely freaking stupid. But let's see what happens when the enemy unit gets a lot of armor. How do they stack up against the Knights of the Realm, who are actually fairly low armor for a shock cavalry of this price range? Can they use their anti-large to tank it out versus a unit like Reiksguard, which has better defensive stats than they do in return because of their armor? So you can see here the Reiksguard, after the initial phase, are starting to perform pretty well, and it's their armor. Even though they have an anti-large, the Knights of the Realm just can't pierce that armor very well. Still a pretty impressive performance from the Knights of the Realm, and it looks like they may actually win here. Nope. So the Reiksguard won. So again, I think it reinforces what I was stating. They're good against large units that don't have armor. That's going to be the use of the Knights of the Realm. Large units, low armor. Alright, Grail Knights. Grail Knights are the next one we're going to take a look at, because we're looking at cavalry here. Grail Knights are going to be definitely an enhanced version of Knights of the Realm, with some very key differences to understand. They never get tired. They're immune to vigor. They have the Blessing of the Lady here, which gives them physical resistance. They are immune to psychology, which means that they won't rout due to terror or fear. And then they still have the Lance formation. Their attacks are magical attacks, so that means instantly against ethereal units, Grail Knights are going to be absolutely superb. Or to any unit that has a weakness to magic. So like if a unit has physical resistance, the magic attacks are going to ignore that. So Grail Knights will be good against ethereal units because they have high physical resistance, or any other unit that has that physical resistance, the Grail Knights are going to excel against. And I believe that would also include tree units. So let's pick Arguelon here. Arguelon, whatever it is. So like this tree... Yeah, see, physical resistance 20%. And against normal units, that gives them a 20% resistance, but against the Grail Knights, it's not going to work. So the Grail Knights have an advantage against anything that has physical resistance because of these magical attacks. If we take a look at their weapon strength breakdown, they are not specifically an anti-armor unit, but they do have a pretty decent bonus versus large at 12, and they start off with an 82 charge bonus, and that's going to go pretty high because you can get extra charge bonus, 36% extra, which, I mean, that's going to be close to another 30 charge bonus that you're going to be able to tack on top of this. So these guys are going to lay down a huge charge bonus when in the lance formation. Just bear in mind that when you go into the lance formation, you're going to be vulnerable to missiles. So just, yeah, something to bear in mind. Now, Grail Knights, again, sacrifice armor, just like the Knights of the Realm do. But I think they make up for it with in more than one way. The fact that they don't get tired, the fact that they have the physical resistance. So the fact that they're, I mean, if these guys had 120 armor like other Cav at this price range, it would be absurd. How do Grail Knights stack up against the competition? Let's go take a look and see what they're good at. Alright, so just a retest real quick. Do Grail Knights trade just as cost effectively versus Crypt Horrors, which I think the Vampire is going to be a common foe of Bretonnia, so I just wanted to test this. And I think the answer is going to be yes. I think the Crypt Horrors are going to get slaughtered even worse than they did by the Knights of the Realm. We can see that that's panning out to be pretty true. The Crypt Horrors get absolutely massacred while causing almost no damage in return. So yeah, Crypt Horrors versus Grail Knights. So Grail Knights are still going to be extremely effective versus unarmored large units, or low armored large units I should say, and I mean extremely effective. Look at that. Absolute slaughter. Let's move on to some of the more interesting tests. What about pretty well armored anti-large foes, like Blood Knights or Demigryph Knights with halberds? How do they stack up? Let's go take a look. Alright, first up, Blood Knights. So let's see how the charge pans out. I did stay in the lance formation because it gives my guys such a massive charge bonus increase, and I'm going to need all I can get to try and defeat these Blood Knights. Blood Knights, they have, I believe, they have Frenzy, and it boosts their stats. You can see their stats here. 39 attack, 41 defense, 39 damage, and I mean, you look at that, so 40, 30, 39, 39, 41, 39. So I mean, the stats are actually pretty close, but there's more armor on the Blood Knights. There's more armor for sure. I'm trying to see this other stat on the Blood Knights. Let's fix them here. Undead, okay, so that's nothing. Disintegrating, crumbling, missile resistance. None of the other stuff is playing into this. It's just Frenzy, which gives them 12% weapon damage, extra charge bonus, and immune to psychology as long as their leadership doesn't break, I believe. No, it's just constant. So yeah, the Blood Knights are going to pretty decisively defeat the Grail Knights there. I think a pretty decent part of it is just due to the armor, to be honest. I mean, the Grail Knights have physical resistance, which is a big deal. But, or actually, you know what? The other stat that I need to look at real quick before I open my mouth on this. Let's go back to the screen. And it could be their bonus versus large as well. Let's look at that. 20, yeah, that's a big piece of it right there. So it's a 22 bonus versus large on the Blood Knights. I would say that's actually the biggest part of the explanation, because otherwise their stats are similar, and the Grail Knights have physical resistance. And if we take a look, their hit points are even similar. They're identical, actually. So armor and the bonus versus large is why the Blood Knights are going to win that pretty much every time. When I say pretty much, I mean every time. It depends on the support from there on out. If it was just a one-on-one engagement, Blood Knights are going to win that every time. You don't usually have one-on-one engagements. You usually have support coming in from a Lord. So the fight between Grail Knights and Blood Knights, I would say, has some initial favor to the Blood Knights, since they're a better unit. But the support that Bretonnia can provide with the Fey Enchantress is pretty big, and it just depends on how well the Vampire uses their Invocation and their Raise the Dead. Alright, Demigryph Knights with halberds versus Grail Knights. I've been using the lance formation because it just gives such a huge boost to the charge bonus. Now, if I'm getting something wrong, and you all just know that the lance formation isn't as good, please tell me why. But how do Grail Knights stack up against Demigryph Knights with halberds? Demigryph Knights with halberds are anti-armor and anti-large. Let's look at the amount of anti-large that they have. That's a 30 bonus versus large with huge armor piercing. But the Demigryph Knights with halberds have a much lower charge, although they have much better armor. The physical resistance of the Grail Knights appears to be panning out, but as the fight wears on, the Demigryph Knights look like they're kind of making a comeback here. I am outflanking them because of the way the charge happened there, but this is going to be a fairly close fight for two units that cost exactly the same. I actually kind of expect the Demigryph Knights to win because of their anti-armor. And Not only are the Demigryph Knights going to win, they're going to win with 13 of their models left. And why is that significant? It's significant because with 13 models left, you could pop a healing spell on there, and it's going to be a big deal. So from the outset, the Demigryph Knight with Halberd is still a better head-to-head unit than the Grail Knight. Head-to-head, okay? So let's keep that in mind. So Grail Knights are going to need support from a Lord or a Damsel when they're or infantry when they're taking on their peers, which is other anti-large cavalry from the big boy factions like the Vampires and the Empire. So Grail Knights in a head-to-head unsupported fight will not defeat Demigryph Knights with Halberds, and they will not defeat Blood Knights. You have to support them properly. I still say that the best use for Grail Knights and Knights of the Realm is against anti-large, lower armor anti-large, lower armor monstrous infantry. They destroy them. They wreck them. And Grail Knights still have enough charge that they are very effective versus infantry as well, especially in rear charges. Just bear in mind they're shock cavalry, and they need to be cycle charged in order to work properly. Alright, last but not least in the Bretonnian cavalry lineup here is the Questing Knights. And Questing Knights have a very specific purpose. They are anti-infantry melee cavalry that have very nice armor-piercing damage at 34. So you have 45 cavalry units with a charge bonus of 42 dishing out 34 armor piercing. They have pretty good melee defense for a cavalry unit, and they have pretty solid melee attack. Decent leadership as well, and they are immune to psychology, so they're not going to rout from fear or terror. Let's go see just how effective they can be. I'm going to stack them up against a Chosen with Great Weapons, so it costs 200 gold more. Let's see who wins. Alright, Questing Knight's going to approach the Chosen with Great Weapons. Now, Chosen with Great Weapons, obviously not really meant to fight cavalry, but they do have a lot of armor piercing, and they are a very expensive infantry unit. I'm not aware of any other cavalry unit in the game that could just potentially bowl through a high-value unit like this without having to cycle charge. Let's see if it'll work. So, Questing Knights versus Chosen with Great Weapons. Who's going to win? Head-to-head, no cycle charging, just straight-up fight. If the Questing Knights win this, it is a very impressive feat, and I don't believe there's any other cavalry unit that can claim this fame. But as we can see, it's actually not going to happen. The Questing Knights do some insane damage to the point of probably being cost-effective, but they didn't defeat it head-on. Well, what happens if you cycle charge a little? Let's take a look. Alright, so cycle charging should help. We're just going to make sure, because what it means is we get to apply our charge bonus multiple times. I left my knights in relatively blocky formation so that the extrication from the fight will be easier, and you can see that we do cause immense damage on the charge. Let's go ahead and cycle charge before the Chosen get a lot of chance to return the damage. Now, you do take some damage and leadership hits typically when pulling out of a fight like this. Let's make sure our formation's roughly as wide as the Chosen. I don't want to overlap them a lot, because I want to make sure that... and you can see we did almost... Yeah, we probably did about 40% damage to the Chosen off that first charge. Let's watch another charge, and I'll give you all a little bit of a cinematic view of this, because it's beautiful. Boom! So, another charge. And we've definitely gone over 50% damage. And I'm going to go ahead and cycle out and back around, because we've probably expended our charge bonus by that point. So you can see that we are being a lot more cost efficient when cycle charging. So against a unit such as this Chosen with Great Weapons, it's quite apparent that there may be some units out there that you can just send your knights into combat and flog them, but a Chosen with Great Weapons is not going to be one of them. So I would say that the very elite infantry, when you're using these Questing Knights, you probably have to be careful about just staying over-engaged in combat. You still want to cycle charge, even though it is a dedicated melee cavalry versus being a shock cavalry. Let's see what happens if I just let the fight play out at this point. So 2 cycle charges and then let the fight play out. Can the Chosen reel it back in? They might. In fact, they're going to, I think. Woo! Look at that. They did it. So, much closer fight when you're cycle charging. Take it for what it means, which is, if you're going up against a very elite unit like that with the Questing Knight, you're still going to have to cycle charge. Is there a point at which, though, you don't need the cycle charge and you still get a very effective result? Well, I don't know. Let's take a look. Alright, Empire Greatswords. Not near as good as Chosen. Great weapons, but a much cheaper unit. Can the Questing Knight just charge in and cost-effectively bowl them over? Let's find out. My guess would probably be yes. So I'm going to fast forward here, and the Greatswords get absolutely shreked by the Questing Knights. So, interesting result, right? The Chosen with Great... Now, there at the very end, the Greatswords finally start to do a lot of damage. So I'm guessing with one cycle charge, you could really wreck the Greatswords. But even right here is a cost-effective result. Just charge in, flatten opponent. So, cycle charge still probably better, but can you flatten certain units like this? Absolutely. Well, what other units would it work with? Let's go find out. If I hit the right buttons. Graveguard with Great Weapon. Similar cost, or identical cost to Greatswords. Probably not as good a stats, though. And they're not going to have support from a Necromancer or anything else. So I would think that this is going to be a near instant victory for the Questing Knights. Look how bad they bowled those guys over on the charge. Let's see what happens. Just charge and forget it. Who's going to win, and by how much? Actually, interesting, the Graveguard actually much better performance. And it may just be due to the fact that they don't, I don't know. Whatever it was, the Graveguard with Great Weapons performed better here. Maybe they have more armor-piercing damage or something, but it still works, and it was still a pretty cost-effective exchange for the Questing Knights. What about Black Orcs or Bestigor? Let's find out. Alright, I'm trying to do a 3-for-1 here. I don't think the AI is going to cooperate. I've got Bestigor, I've got Black Orcs, and a Longbeard with Great Weapons. So I'm going to charge in, hit all these infantry. Again, the AI is not exactly cooperating because they're not going head-to-head with me, but let's just see what happens if I plow in 3 elite infantry units versus the 3 Questing Knights. Who's going to win the fight? No cycle charges. The Bestigor are getting wrecked. So Bestigor out. Black Orcs are getting wrecked. Believe it or not, the Grumbling Guard is the one that's doing the best. So I would say Black Orcs and Bestigor get shreked. Let's just get rid of the Black Orcs real quick and then get out of there. Well, I can't quite get rid of them the way I want to. I'm trying to let this fight play out between the Grumbling Guard. It looks like the Grumbling Guard have the best chance of resisting. They did get a little help from these Black Orcs, but it looked like they were going to win that either way. So Grumbling Guard have the charge defense against large foes, though, I think. We'll have to go look. But Bestigor got wrecked. Even Black Orcs got wrecked. That's a big deal for Black Orcs to get wrecked like that. So I think what it means is Questing Knights, as a general rule, are going to be very good against armor. I've actually seen additional uses for these guys that I could explain to you. Now, Questing Knights anti-armor is extremely good. And, maybe one interesting scenario that I could try and show you with the AI here would be like, think about it. Vampires. You're going to come up against vampires. Let's say, and you have, let's say a fairly, common occurrence where you get the Red Duke on a Barded Nightmare. He's got all of his abilities here. He's got El Sif and everything else. Let's say that he has Raise the Dead and Invocation into Hack. And those are the 2 spells that he brings. And let's say you're up against... Oh, crap. My bad. I forgot that that's the general, so let's fix it again. You gotta give Air a minute sometimes. Items, yeah, that's it. And let's say that he has a couple of Blood Knights that are riding with him. And let's say that you're gonna play as Bretonnia, and that you are sporting the Fey Enchantress on Silvaron. She has all her abilities, which includes the one that tears apart enemies slowly over time. And let's assume that she has the Chalice of Potions, because that's not too far of a stretch. And typically you're going to see Grail Knights. Well, could you support her with Questing Knights? I don't know, it's a good question. They're much better versus armored infantry. They have a lot of armor piercing, and Blood Knights are a heavily armored unit. Now bear in mind that Questing Knights don't have near as good a charge bonus, and they also fail in the sense that they don't have an anti-large, but they're very good against armor. Well, what happens if the vampires are playing this game? So let's see, they're at 68.90, which means that I still have some money to spend. And let's say that I throw in a Royal Pegasus Knight, which is pretty common. And it's actually pretty common for Bretonnia to come with... Oh, crap, I did it again. I never learn, folks. Chalice. Good, good, good. Alright, everything's good. Let's say that some Royal Pegasus Knights get thrown in, because this is a pretty common pick these days. Alright, yes, I've spent more than the vampires here, I get it. But typically, it's not too uncommon for the vampires to have 2 Blood Knights sometimes down on the ground, so this just means that I would have cheaper infantry and, you know, blah, blah, blah. That's a whole different story. But how quickly or can this type of support be better in the sense that now this gives me flexibility versus infantry, and it also gives me flexibility versus large because of the Pegasus Knights. Again, I understand the spend is different. Let's just go look at this for the sake of test. Alright, here comes the test. I'm going to charge right over here. I'm going to have my Royal Pegasus Knights ready for support. I cast a healing spell immediately. And I'm going to rear charge the Blood Knights. You can see my Questing Knights definitely get beat up a lot faster than Grail Knights would. But can I support them? Can I keep them in the game through the healing? And use the Fey Enchantress to gain success here. The Vampire's already raising the dead, which I like. Can we defeat Blood Knights in this type of setup? See how they're pinning in my Pegasus Knights? It's actually a really good move. Their zombies are quite good at it. And this is part of the challenge you're going to face whenever you come up against vampires. Yeah, see here, I can't even get away from the zombies effectively, because the Pegasus have a pretty low mass, comparatively speaking, to say like Griffins or other units that people are used to seeing. See, I can't even get away from the zombies. So this is what makes the vampires so dang dangerous when it comes to pinning in. So again, I'm just talking about whether or not this could be a viable option. We did get rid of 1 Blood Knight up in here, I believe. Yeah, we got rid of 1 Blood Knight. So theoretically, if we can get rid of the other, we'll survive. Still can't quite overcast. The Enchantress can use her Arcane Conduit. I got my Chalice of Potions. We can use it to get rid of some of the zombies. So, I mean, it would appear that the Questing Knights are a viable option here with the support of the Royal Pegasus Knights. We initially took massive damage. Look at that, how many zombies we just killed there with the... yeah. So you can defeat Blood Knights this way. The Armor Piercing of the Questing Knights now, they take a throttling on the charge. So you have to be ready to heal immediately. But if they get the support of the Pegasus Knights, they're actually pretty good at helping you wipe out Blood Knights. Again, I understand the spend for Bretonnia here was greater. That's not the point here. It's pretty easy for a scenario like this to crop up. I've already had it happen to me several times in battles where I've used Questing Knights to defeat Blood Knights with the support of Royal Pegasus Knights. The Enchantress is cheaper than the Red Duke. The 2 Questing Knights are cheaper than Blood Knights by 500. And the Pegasus Knights are very expensive, but you can make up for it by bringing cheaper infantry than what the vampires are able to field. So their Graveguard costs more than your Foot Squires, and they typically have to bring support units like maybe like a Black Coach or something else to help them out. So in any case, you see there that the Questing Knights actually did their job quite wonderfully. So I think there's more uses to Questing Knights than just the idea of them being specifically anti-elite armored infantry. Look how many kills they got here. A lot of them were probably zombies, but I mean they killed a fair few of these Blood Knights. And you saw the Blood Knights absolutely ruined this unit on the charge. I had to use healing to keep it alive. But the Fey Enchantress, with her support for units like this, all that armor piercing starts to pan out. And then the massive anti-large charges of the Pegasus Knights will just absolutely shut down the vampires. Now, I don't know what the vampires did with their Invocation of the Heck. They may not have used it right there, so does it turn out this way every time? Maybe, maybe not, but I'm just giving you ideas, right, for creative builds. And along with the Comet, if you're able to get a good Comet hit on her cavalry, it's going to do some damage, or on the enemy cavalry, it's going to do some damage. So that's it for the cavalry discussion today. I know we didn't talk about yeomen or mounted yeomen, but those guys are boring anyway. So there you go. There's a rundown of the Knights of Bretonnia. Well, I say that. We still got Grail Guardians. We'll save them for another episode because they're a little bit different, and we'll talk about them then. HeirofCarthage, signing out for now. Hope you all enjoyed a look at the Knights of Bretonnia.